Year 30 AD Jerusalem. It's still early, but you're already awake. Light enters through narrow gaps in the stone wall of the house where you slept. A simple construction, partially excavated in the limestone, like those that archaeologists discovered in excavations around the ancient city. The floor is made of dirt. The air carries the smell of cold ash from a lamp that has burned all night. Outside, the city is already alive. It's Jewish Easter time, and that changes everything. Scholars estimate that Jerusalem, which normally had around 30 to 40,000 inhabitants, could exceed 100,000 during this festival. Pilgrims coming from all over Judea and even from more distant regions filled narrow streets, courtyards, and rooftops. And you feel it immediately. The sound, hurried steps, overlapping voices in Aramaic, Hebrew, even Greek. Animals being taken to the temple, metal banging, wood dragging. But something is different today. There's tension in the air, a tension you can't explain yet. And then you listen, a name being repeated among people. Jesus, the Nazarene. But not like before, not with curiosity. Urgently. You leave. The daylight is already strong, reflecting on the light stones of the buildings. The heat begins to rise, typical of the region's dry spring. The sky is clear, but there is a strange, almost heavy feeling, as if something is about to happen. And you go with the flow. The crowd is going in one direction, outside the walls, to a place you know, or at least heard about, Golgotha, an outcrop of limestone used by the Romans for executions. Such locations were chosen strategically, close to roads for everyone to see. Archaeological evidence shows that these areas were outside the walls exactly as Roman practice required. And that raises a question. Why are so many people going to watch? Because executions were not rare. But today, it doesn't feel like just one more. And the closer you get, but the sound changes. Less talk, more silence, more expectation. You feel it in your body, in the rhythm of your heart. Something is about to come to an end. And when you finally see, it's already too late. The body is already there, suspended and fighting for air. Arms outstretched, held together by nails. A practice confirmed by discoveries such as the skeleton of Yehohanan, found in Jerusalem with a nail still piercing the heel bone. Breathing is irregular, forced. Each movement of the body against the wood is an attempt to survive a few more seconds, and you realize this won't last long, but it should last. Crucifixions were long, slow, cruel to the end. So why does this feel different? And it's at that moment when you're still trying to understand what happens. The last move, the last effort, the last sound, and then everything stops in a way that no one there was prepared to feel. The silence continues, but now you realize that it is not natural. It weighs, it spreads. He takes over the place in a way that doesn't match what you just saw. Because this here should be different. You're still standing, looking at the motionless body before you, but your attention starts to shift, not for him, but for what is happening around, or rather, for what is not happening. No screams, no celebration, no orders being given. Oh, and that's too weird. Because historical evidence shows that Roman executions were noisy public events. Soldiers jeered, the crowd reacted, religious leaders argued among themselves. It was common for there to be bets, insults, and even direct interaction with the condemned person. But here, nothing. You look at a soldier to your left. He's not laughing. He's not relaxed. He is still. The hand still holds the spear, but not firmly. The gaze is fixed on the body, as if trying to process something that doesn't make sense. And this raises an unsettling question. What exactly are they seeing that you are also feeling? Because it's not just silence, it's the climate. Something changed in the environment. The air feels colder, even though the sun is still there. The light strangely opaque. Scholars estimate that unusual atmospheric phenomena may have occurred that day. Ancient reports speak of darkness for hours during the period of the crucifixion, something that does not fit with a common eclipse, as Easter took place on a full moon. But the most important thing is not to explain, is to understand. You feel it on your skin, as if the world had gone out of rhythm. And then you notice something even more subtle. People are avoiding looking at each other. The crowd that previously pressed, shouted, reacted, now keeps its distance. Small groups begin to move away, slowly, without coordination, as if no one had the courage to be the first to truly react. But that's not all, because some still stay, and those who stay are different. You see tense faces, eyes wide, some scared. Yes, fear. And that doesn't make sense, because Rome dominated that scene. Rome controlled death. Rome feared nothing there. So why this collective discomfort? Because deep down, everyone there is noticing the same thing. This didn't end the way it should have. And that feeling starts to grow, like an invisible pressure, as if that silence was preparing something. And you feel it stronger now in the chest, in breathing, in the way your body can't relax. Because silence didn't bring relief. He brought expectation. And that changes everything, because executions end with dispersal. But here, the silence is holding everyone in place, as if something was still about to happen. And the most disturbing thing, it's just that no one there, not even you, can leave. Not yet. Because somehow, everyone feels that moment. It's not over yet. You look around, and for the first time, the focus is no longer just the cross. Now the focus is on people's faces, because that's where the impact appears first. Not in speeches, not in explanations, but in expressions that change almost instantly. A few minutes earlier, there was irony. There was provocation. There was that cruel courage which the crowd often has when protected by numbers. But now, that's gone. You see a man take 2 steps back, as if he needs to put distance between himself and what he just witnessed. A woman puts her hand over her mouth. Another lowers his head, not in reverence, but as if realizing too late that he has gone too far. And that matters, because Roman executions were done precisely to desensitize. They were public, visible, strategically positioned near thoroughfares to amplify the effect of fear. Archaeologists discovered that execution areas in Roman Judea were located outside the walls, in places of maximum exposure, so that the death functioned as a political warning. But here, the effect appears reversed. Instead of hardening people, this moment breaks them down. Look closer. The soldiers also changed. They were professionals, used to pain, blood, screams, bleeding. The cross for them was imperial routine, a tool of intimidation. And even so, one of them remains too still. Another keeps his eyes fixed without the trained indifference of someone who has seen it 100 times. Their body is still in control, but their countenance is no longer. because it's one thing to conduct an execution. Another is to feel that something has happened there that is completely beyond your control, and the crowd notices it. Religious leaders who previously pushed for the event now seem smaller within the scene itself. There is no open celebration. There is no feeling of clean victory. There is tension. There is restrained haste. There's that discomfort that arises when the result you wanted finally arrives. But it doesn't bring peace. And this raises a question. If they fought so hard to get to this moment, why does no one seem satisfied now? Because what ends up before them doesn't look like a simple failure. It feels like closure, end of act, end of presence, end of a voice that had occupied streets, courtyards, meals, and discussions for months. And that weighs. Scholars estimate that Jerusalem, crowded at Easter, was filled with pilgrims and rumors. The death of such a well-known man would not disappear into thin air. She would cross the city in minutes. You feel it in the environment. People aren't just reacting to what they see. They are trying to understand what this means. And this is perhaps the most human detail of all. At that moment, no one there has a ready answer. Just a sudden emptiness. Just the feeling that something public has just ended, and something much bigger has just begun. And then what no one expected happens. Not just death, but the break. Because the moment everything seems to have ended, the environment itself begins to say that nothing has ended. The light changes first. You realize this before you can explain it. The sky, which already seemed strange, now weighs down on Jerusalem like a stone. The normal afternoon glow disappears, and the entire hill appears to be covered in a shadow that doesn't match the time of day. You feel the change in your skin. The wind cuts differently. The air cools. The crowd looks up, and for a second, no one looks at the cross. Everyone looks at the sky. This matters because Easter took place on a full moon, and evidence suggests that the darkness described in ancient sources does not fit with an ordinary solar eclipse. In other words, for those who were there, this did not seem like a normal calendar phenomenon. It looked like a sign. It sounded like a warning. But that's not all, because now the floor enters the scene. At first it's subtle, a short vibration underfoot. You almost think you imagined it, but then it comes again, stronger, and the stone beneath his sandals seems to respond with a dry, raw tremor, as if the mountain itself had been struck from within. You lose your balance for a moment. Someone screams. Another clings to the arm of the person next to him, and the revelation comes in full force. It's not just a man dying. It's as if the entire city is reacting. Scholars estimate that first-century Jerusalem, built of limestone, amplified this kind of sensation. Houses, walls, staircases, and quarry areas responded to the shocks with dry echoes and noticeable displacements. In such a city, any tremor would be felt as something intimate, almost bodily. And that's what makes the moment so overwhelming, because until now, many could still think that they were just seeing the end of an uncomfortable preacher. But now, creation itself seems to reject this reading. Look closer. The faces change again. The sarcasm disappears. Security disappears. Even the soldiers' trained toughness begins to crack. Because when nature enters the scene, the event stops being just political, stops being just Roman, stops being just human. And this is the break in expectations that no one there wanted to face. They thought they were wrapping up a story. But at that very moment, everything around them begins to suggest that they have just touched something much bigger than they can control. Something sacred, something dangerous, something that turns death into revelation. And suddenly, fear is no longer on the cross. It's everywhere. And it's at that moment that you realize who isn't there, or rather, who is but can't get closer. You turn your face, moving away from the crowd a little, trying to breathe better, trying to understand what just happened. And then you see a small group further away. They don't scream, they don't argue, they don't react like others. They remain, stopped, as if getting out of there was impossible. Among them, women. That already says a lot, because historically, Roman executions were hostile environments, dominated by soldiers and male mobs. But reports indicate that female followers were present, something that culturally reveals a level of emotional bond much deeper than simple curiosity. And you feel it just by looking. It's not curiosity, it's not a momentary shock, it's loss. But there is something even stronger. They are not close to the cross, and this is no coincidence. Roman practice restricted approach. Soldiers maintained control of the perimeter, ensuring that no one interfered. Archaeological evidence and historical records show that crucifixion was strictly supervised. Direct contact with the condemned was not permitted. So they stay there, far enough away to not be stopped, close enough to not abandon. And this raises an unspoken question. What's worse, see from afar or not see? Look closer. One of them leans on another. Another keeps his gaze fixed as if looking away meant accepting the end. And there is a detail that almost no one notices at first glance. They don't react with panic. They react with internal rupture, because what just happened wasn't just the death of someone important to them. It was the collapse of everything they believed was about to happen. Scholars estimate that many followers expected an intervention, something that would change the course of events, perhaps even at that last moment. The messianic expectation in the first century was deeply linked to the idea of liberation, reversal, victory. But this was the opposite. Silence, death, closing. And this is the part that breaks inside, because losing someone is one thing, but losing what you believe that person would do, it's quite another. And this changes everything, because now you understand that the impact is not just on the cross, it's in that space between the cross and the observer. It's this forced distance, in that look that doesn't reach, in this absolute impotence, and perhaps that's what makes the moment even heavier. They are there, they see, they feel, but they can't do anything. Nothing to stop it, nothing to change, nothing to go back on. And as the city slowly begins to react, this small group remains frozen in time, stuck in that moment, where it all ended, but it still doesn't make any sense. And then the public event begins to die. Not all at once, not with an order, not with an ad, but like a fire that loses strength and leaves only embers, smoke, and a void that is difficult to explain. You see it at the feet of the crowd. People start moving again, but without the energy they used to. There is no longer that pressure to get closer. The impulse of curiosity no longer exists. Now, what exists is something else, the need to leave, and yet no one leaves in peace. You see small groups slowly disbanding down the limestone slope. Sandals drag dust. Tense shoulders collide in silence. Some look back one last time as if trying to confirm that it really happened, because until a few moments ago, that was a Roman spectacle. Now looks like ruin. This matters because public executions had a clear political function. Rome exposed bodies to scroll the message. The location, the format, the visibility, everything was calculated. Evidence suggests that crucifixion areas close to access roads served exactly this purpose, transforming death into a lasting warning. But here, something unexpected happens. The warning loses force. The show breaks. The scene no longer produces dominance. It produces discomfort. Look closer. Even the sounds changed. Before there were voices, mockery, hurried steps, dry orders. Now you hear fabric brushing, short breaths, a restrained cry in the distance, the wind passing through the wood. It's a closing sound, a sound that celebrates nothing, a sound that almost apologizes without using words. And this raises a profound question. How does an event designed to showcase power end up leaving such a bitter taste? Because what just happened was beyond the control of the performance itself. Rome set up the cross. The leaders pressed. The crowd watched. But the end no longer belonged to any of them. And this is where it shifts. You start to feel like the hill is deflating, but the weight only increases. The more people leave, the stronger the feeling becomes that something irreversible happened there. Like when a theater empties after the last scene, and for a moment, the silence on the stage says more than the entire play. That's Golgotha now. No longer a spectacle point, but a later place. After the scream, after the shock, after certainty. And perhaps this is the hardest part. The public event ended, but no one left there the same as they were when they arrived. Jerusalem is still standing, but it no longer looks like the same city it did a few hours ago. You come down from the hill with the others, and it feels strange because everything around you continues to function. People walking, doors opening, footsteps echoing on the cobblestone streets, voices crossing the narrow alleys. But nothing really seems normal. It's as if the entire city has taken an invisible blow. The market still exists. The houses are still full. The walls still surround everything with the same strength. But the air changed. You feel it as you head back towards the inner streets, passing pale limestone buildings, cisterns carved into the rock, staircases worn thousands of feet. Archaeologists discovered that first-century Jerusalem was a compact, dense city full of levels, terraces, and tight alleys. And in a place like this, news doesn't travel slowly. It spreads like smoke, by word of mouth, from look to look, from silence to silence. And that's what makes this moment so powerful. Because maybe not everyone saw it, but somehow everyone starts to feel it. You notice it in groups standing on street corners, in conversations that are too short, in the way some people speak softly, as if the city has become sensitive to sound. Nobody knows all the details, but everyone knows that something ended that day. And this raises a question. How can a single death cross an entire city so quickly? Because it wasn't just an execution. It was the public end of a presence that had affected Jerusalem before. He had entered the city. It had been commented on. It had provoked a reaction in the temple. It had attracted crowds. Scholars estimate that during Easter, with the city overcrowded, any event linked to a well-known figure became an immediate topic of conversation. But there is something deeper here. It's not just news, it's atmosphere. It's that feeling that takes over a place when something irreversible has happened and no one has yet been able to put it into words. Look closer. Some come home and don't know what to say. Others repeat what they heard, but their own voice comes out differently, and the entire city seems to enter a rare state. She's still alive on the outside, but inside, something stopped. And perhaps that is the real weight of that end. It was not just the closure of a man before a cross. It was the moment when all of Jerusalem began to realize, still without fully understanding, that it would never forget that afternoon. And this is where everything gets deeper than anyone there can see. Because as you walk through the streets of Jerusalem, something invisible has already begun. You still feel the weight in your chest. He still hears, in his memory, that strange silence that took over Golgotha. But now, far from the hill, the impact changes shape. It enters you, and you can't explain it. Because, rationally, it was just an execution. Rome did this hundreds of times. Archaeologists discovered several crucifixion sites around the empire, and the practice was common, almost routine. Exposed bodies, slow deaths, crowds watching. But that didn't stay in place. It followed you. And this raises a question that starts to bother us. Why doesn't this moment end? Look closer. You try to get on with your day, but something gets stuck. Conversations feel empty. Sounds seem distant. Even the late afternoon light, reflecting off the city's pale stones, seems lifeless. And then you realize it's not the environment and you. Something inside you recognized that moment as too important to ignore. But it's not just you. The whole city is like this. Some try to explain, others avoid thinking. But there is a common, almost collective feeling as if something had been broken. Scholars estimate that in the first century Jewish context, the temple was the absolute center of spiritual life. Sacrifices, rituals, presence of God, everything concentrated there, structured, organized, controlled. But there is one detail that few fully understand. And this is where everything changes. Ancient reports describe that at the exact moment of death, something happened inside the temple. The veil, a thick curtain made of heavy linen separating the most sacred space, the Holy of Holies, from the rest. Historians describe this veil as enormous, possibly several centimeters thick, woven to completely isolate that space. And according to reports, it tears from top to bottom. It's not wear and tear, it's not an accident, it's rupture, and that changes everything. Because that veil wasn't just woven, it was limit, it was separation. It was the line between the human and the divine. And suddenly, that line no longer exists. And this changes everything, because as you walk the streets trying to understand what happened, the entire system that underpinned the way people related to God has just been crossed. No warning, without permission, no immediate explanation. And maybe you can't put it into words yet, but you feel it. In the background, something opened. Something has been released. Something that no longer depends on place, structure, ritual. And that is disconcerting, because if it's true, so that moment was not the end. It was the beginning of something that hits you even though I was there, in the middle of the crowd, just trying to leave. And that's where the question stops being historical And it starts to get personal. What exactly changed inside you after that moment and now? Jerusalem is getting dark. The shadows lengthen across the city's clear stones. The heat of the day begins to recede, and you feel a very strange thing. The world goes on, but you don't. Your feet still walk. His body still makes its way through the cramped streets, past limestone walls, past low doorways, past houses lit by small oil lamps, like the ones archaeologists discovered in excavations of first-century homes in Jerusalem. But inside, you are still there. It's still in that moment. It's still in that silence. And that is the strongest of all, because the moment is over. But it didn't go away. Look closer. The city is trying to get back to normal. Someone closes a door. Someone calls a child inside. Someone lights a fire for the evening meal. The sound of life continues, as it always has. But to you, nothing sounds the same, because now there is a before, and there is an after. And you know exactly where that line was drawn, in that last breath, in that impossible pause, in that silence that swallowed the hill. And this is where it becomes personal, because perhaps this is the most disconcerting truth of all. The moments that change the story the most don't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes they come in the form of closure. Sometimes they feel like loss. Sometimes they feel like the end all be all. But without almost anyone realizing it at the time, they are opening something completely new. And maybe that's why this scene is still alive after 2,000 years. Not just because Jesus died, but because at that moment, many people thought they were seeing the end, when in fact, she was standing in the doorway of something much bigger, something that still reaches you, here, now. Because we all know that kind of silence, that moment when something falls apart, in which a hope seems to die. When you look at your own life and think, it's over. But what if the moment that feels like closure isn't final closure? What if God also works in silence? What if what seems like absolute loss is exactly the point where everything begins to be transformed? That's the question that remains. Not about the crowd, not about Rome, not about Jerusalem, about you. What in your life today seems to have come to an end, but perhaps it is still in God's hands. If this script put you in this scene, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments. Which part of that moment moved you the most? The silence, the weight of the city, or the feeling that that end hid something bigger